Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and today we welcome Michael Harriot to The Stacks. Michael is a writer, journalist, poet, author, storyteller, and he is one of those talking heads you've seen on just about every news channel anytime something Black happens. Michael is also the author of a brand new book called Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America. The book seeks to correct the mythology of Blackness that's been implanted in our collective memory and tells the story of America by the Black people who shaped it. The book provides an educational, hilarious, and searing antidote to the nation's almost true legend of Black history. Today, we talk about why he wanted to write this book in this way, how he hopes Black AF history will change the conversations around American history, and we get into the musical Hamilton. Remember, the Stacks Book Club pick for October is Tar Baby by Toni Morrison, and we will discuss the book on October 25th with Minda Honey. Everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. If you like this show, or you like books in general, or maybe you just really like snacks, or you want to be a part of a community that is excited about all of those things and more, you must head to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. For just $5 a month, you get to be part of making this show possible. I truly could not make this show without the Stacks Pack. And you also get perks like our virtual book club meetups, our very active Discord that has the best book recommendations, recipes, hot takes on The Bachelor, whatever you need, we've got it on the Discord. Plus, you get our monthly bonus episodes, which right now are audio from the tour. And of course, you get shout outs on this very podcast. So let's do some now. Shout out to our newest members of the Stacks Pack, Christina Bautista, Courtney Hummel, Andrea Roning, Olivia Gabay, and Jaleesa Whitley. Thank you all so much for joining the Stacks Pack, and thank you to every single person who is already a part of the Stacks Pack. As I said before, and I will say a million times over, I could not make this show without the Stacks Pack. If you're not in the Stacks Pack yet, head to patreon.com/thestacks to join. It is never too late to support this show or any of your favorite artists and creatives. Okay, now it's time for my conversation with Michael Harriot. All right, everybody, I am so excited. I get to talk to, I don't know, maybe the smartest person in the world. I haven't quite decided yet, but I think we're close to that. I'm joined today by author, commentator, Twitter superhero, Michael Harriot. Welcome to the Stacks.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. Your new book is called Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America. And for people who aren't familiar yet, will you tell them in about 30 seconds what this book is about?
This book is about the history of America through the eyes of Black people. So there are a lot of books that are about the history of America that are kind of by default filtered through the eyes of whiteness. There are a lot of books about Black people filtered through the eyes of Black people, but this is a book about how Black people see America and what we experienced as Americans from the 1400s until basically yesterday.
Yeah. I love the framing because it is like sort of this specific shift. It's not about Black people in America, and it's not about America. It's about how Black people have seen and experienced America, which is like a slight shift, but it makes such a difference. Why did you want to write this book in this way? Where did this idea come from for you? And what did you want to make sure you did with this book?
So initially, when I started, I pitched a book. So I used to teach a class called Race as an Economic Construct. A lot of people are always surprised to find out that my background is as an economist, a macroeconomist. And I taught a class called Race as an Economic Construct. So I pitched a book called White Peopleology about viewing race through that lens of economics. And every time I met with publishers, they were like, yeah, we like that idea. But what about that history thing you do on Twitter? And so a one-book deal turned into a two-book deal. And when I originally proposed this, it was 2018. And the title of the first book, White Peopleology, the subtitle, they thought no one would understand the reference in the subtitle because it was called White Peopleology, Toward a More Critical Race Theory. And they had never heard of critical race theory then. And so they said, let's do the history book first. And so now everybody knows about critical race theory, and I don't have a book on critical race theory.
Yeah, well, you will. That's the second book.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how it came about.
I love that. I love that. I think so. I follow you on Twitter. I love you on Twitter. I think you do such a great job of like breaking down complicated things for us regular people with regular sized brains. And I love that you sort of do, a similar thing in this book. But what I was really struck by was how much new to me information there was in this book. New people, stories I'd never heard before, but also sort of how you subvert conventional thinking. And I'm wondering, like, is that just who you are? Like, are you just a person who you'll be having a conversation with someone and you'll say something and then they'll be like, wow, I never thought about it that way? Or is there something that you do to sort of subvert conventional thinking?
Well, I think in this book, it is a little of each of those things. So I think part of it comes from I was homeschooled until I was 12 years old. So not learning in the conventional American education system, I think is part of it. And, of course, being in a Black family in a Black neighborhood, not having that subconscious deference to whiteness that people are accustomed to. But I also intentionally did some things, right? So there are subtle things. For instance, here's one. When I refer to enslaved Africans, right? I did the research, and if I was talking about a specific person, I tried to see where they came here from, what was the tribe or the kingdom or the culture that they came here from. But all the white people in the book are just white people. Now, like that, people might think that is, kind of unnecessary or anti-white or however people will frame it, but when most people learn history, they learn it the exact opposite way, right? They learn about the French settlers and the English colonists and the Spanish conquistadors. And then all the Black people are just Black people, Africans, right? They don't have a past history, a political motivation, a religion. And I wanted to kind of be subversive while showing America, like, this is your standard. This is the way you teach history from the white perspective. So it should be okay if I do this from the Black perspective using your standards.
Right. Oh, I love that, because that is totally the standard. When you were trying to find information on, the Black people in the book, were you doing your own research trying to find where people came from, or was that information sort of readily available to you?
A lot of it was my own research. Of course, it's available if you kind of dig for it.
Right.
And I also had historical consultants. My main consultant on the book, Blair Kelly, who also has a book out called Black Folk, is a historian. And she's a historian. She's now the University of North Carolina's chair for their Department of Southern Studies. So she kind of gave me a curriculum. And sometimes when I reach a wall, she'd tell me, hey, you should look here, or you shouldn't forget to include this, or here's a perspective that you didn't include. I did a lot of it is primary research. We went through a lot of Black newspapers and Black media to find out what Black people were thinking at that time. So it's not just my perspective about how we would view it, but what Black people at the time were thinking about this current or past historical event.
Yeah, and you talk about that sort of like a note on sources, where your non-source list. You talk about like how people can find this like through records at the churches or Black media at the time and stuff. And I thought that was a really helpful guide as a reader to kind of get a sense of where your headspace was and where you were pulling from. A book like this, a book about American history told from the perspective of Black people, doesn't exist. But this sort of like writing history again and again, like we do it constantly throughout history. There's always these new history books, new ways to look at the past. I'm wondering, like, for your approach, how were you thinking about making this book, like making something that's worth publishing, that's worth spending your time writing on? What was your perspective going in to say, this is the place I want to carve out for my book?
Well, the thing I wanted most was for it to be accessible. So I don't want it to just be a book for people who are really interested in deep dives of history, right? Mm-hmm. So the average Black person I wanted to read it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think I did that by, you could do little things, graphic design, right? It's kind of formatted graphically as a textbook. So there are inserts and there are quizzes at the end of chapters like, oh, remember this thing you just read? Hey, don't forget that because it's going to be in the next chapter. And, humor is a big part of that, right? People relate to humor. And I think I was intentional about doing that. And I also wanted it to be a book that, so there's this thing, like, have you ever like heard a noise and, no one else heard it? Say, do you hear that noise? Or did you see that thing that just happened? Right? Like Black people constantly live in that kind of state where we're wondering if like the whole world is gaslight. Like, is it me or that? Does that seem racist? Right? And I wanted people to know that it's not just a feeling. There is an actual historical basis for it. So I wanted people to like not necessarily explicitly say, this is why this happened. But when you read about these things, you realize, oh, now I understand, right? Like when you read about the headright system, right? And that like white people got 50 acres of land for every enslaved person that they brought over here. And then you read about the New Deal and you read about, how all of the ways that basically white people got government handouts. You understand, you might have that aha moment. I don't have to say, hey, white people be getting government handouts. I can just lay out the facts. And when they make the argument that, well, Black people just need to work harder and focus on education, you can point to these facts and say, now I'm armed with something that supports that feeling of, wait, what do you mean? Like we worked all these years for free. What do you mean work hard? Right. And so those are the things that I wanted to do with this book.
Yeah, there's a few moments that I noted for myself of like sort of these aha moments. And, I love history and I read a lot of history. I read a lot for this job. Like I've read, Carol Anderson is one of my favorite authors. Like she's been so helpful with my thinking about history. But there's a few moments in this book where I was like, how had I never thought about Black history or American history in this way? Which is one where you talk about how the Civil War was really a battle between three sides. This idea that it wasn't actually like the North versus the South or the slaveholders versus the non-slaveholders, but that Black people were their own side and that they were fighting for their freedom. And that regardless of what everyone else was doing, like they were unified in picking the side that was the best for them and that they were pulling and they were shaping the conversation. And it wasn't just something that happened to them, but that Black people were an active part of what happened with the Civil War. And similarly with the Revolutionary War, and that they went from the British to the Patriots or whatever, the Americans. And I had a similar moment when you talked about Black people and religion and how the religions, Black people didn't convert to Christianity. Christianity converted to Black people, and that Black people shaped what religion looked like in America too. And there were so many moments like that in the book that I think like those aha moments you're speaking to, I certainly like felt them and had them and was like, let me take a note here.
Yeah, I think that context, right? Like, so you can learn that Black people got here in 1619, right? And you can learn that, the King James Bible was written in 1609. But when you put it in the context of, those two things happened simultaneously, there wasn't like this Christian religion that we know now wasn't pervasive. And so there were new Black people and a new religion on the scene that was being shaped at the same time. Just putting them next to each other gives you context of, that's why it is the way it is. And you don't have to explicitly say it. You could just present the facts and say, hey, like it was this new thing called Christianity and there's a new thing in America, this race-based slavery. And those two developed simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And knowing that gives you a new context. I don't even know if it is reframing history as much as it is juxtaposing two things beside each other and giving people context.
And also like giving Black people a seat at the table in some of these conversations, because I feel like so much of history, American history, the way that it's taught is like this, like you were saying before, this happened and Black people were there, and not that Black people were making things happen. Another point in the book that I had this similar feeling was when you talked about like the Red Summer and the ways that, you know, these white mob violence against Black communities. And it had always been taught to me that white people were upset with Black people having freedom. And in this book, you really set it up more like Black people were thriving and white people were floundering. And like, let's not forget that the white people had lost their bearings. Like, they didn't know what the fuck was going on. And it wasn't just that they were jealous, but that they felt that that something had been taken from them, and that Black people were doing so well and they were just basically loser fuck ups. And I felt like, oh, right, sure. It's not just like, oh, Black people have a thing. It's that Black people have a thing and white people are lackluster in this case.
Yeah, I think that is important. You know, there's a statistic that I think people always find surprising, in that on the eve of the Civil War, you know, because Black people were property, the value of that human property was worth more than all of the banks and all of the factories and all of the railroads in America combined. Now, imagine taking that away from an economy and
Right.
giving it essentially to Black people, because we own ourselves, right?
Right.
So imagine the kind of chaos that would engender. And I think you can understand history better, and you can understand what happened better when you understand it in that context.
Yeah. You include a lot of stories of rebellion throughout the book, which I don't know about you, but every time I read stories of like enslaved people rebelling, I get like super hype. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, we did that. But I'm wondering why you wanted to spend so much time on those stories.
Well, one of the reasons is it's like my favorite kind of Black story, like the explicit rebellion.
Same.
And then the other part of it is that of course, there's this historical narrative, and I don't have to say it explicitly, like there were happy slaves, and, you know, it was a product of the time, right? And that is counterbalanced by the fact that there were so many rebellions all across the country and in every state and in every, right? So if it was this frequent, that idea that the people were happy and complacent goes against the stuff that they actually did, and all of the laws they had to pass and all of the protections white people had to take to ensure that they were protected against this constant looming threat of rebellion. And so knowing about that, and knowing, because a lot of us don't know about this because we've learned this whitewashed version of history, it makes us think that we didn't rebel against the stuff that was done to us, and not that, no, they had to put a whole system of laws and buildings and armories in place because they knew they couldn't control us on their own. Like, it was not even a fair fight. They couldn't even stand up to a fair fight. And knowing that kind of empowers you, in my opinion.
I felt that. I definitely felt that. And like, there were some rebellions that I'd never heard of before. And I was like, ooh, this is a new one. I love it here. Like, it is empowering. And it also is like, again, like I keep harping on, is that Black people shaped this country. We, like it or not, we shaped the police. The police are here because of how badass we were. Like, they weren't here before. Like, we, you know, it's definitely a double-edged sword, but it is like that we invented these things, that we created a need for so many things in this country that otherwise would not have been. And obviously not necessarily a great reason, but it is something that we did, that we contributed in ways. And I feel like, you know, the rebellion stories also just feel really good to read. They just feel nice. I'm just like, I'm proud of us. Like, this is great. You mentioned a little bit having someone who helped you sort of like with the historical stuff, but how how did you research? I know that you know so much. I know that you're a wealth of knowledge. You talk about it from a young age. Talking about like Reagan's, that's like the first story in the book, Reagan's election, and how your grandma was like, how do you know this? And you were like, well, I've been in the small room reading books or whatever. But how much research did you have to do for this book? And how much stuff did you sort of already know and you were just fleshing out? Like, how did you outline this? How did this come to be? Because it's a big undertaking. It's 400 years, 400 plus years.
So I don't know what percentage I knew versus what percentage I didn't know. I know probably most of it I didn't know. And some of it, a lot of it I learned specifically for the book. And the research was a lot of ways, right? Going through Black newspapers, looking up primary sources, traveling to places, asking historians, like, well, hey, what if I wanted to know more about this? Where could I find it? And so it was almost every piece of research, buying a lot of books on the subject. Luckily, like Kindle, for instance, was a great help, right? So if you need to know, like, I bought a lot of books because I needed to know one specific fact, and it was only in this book. And so I had to just buy the book to find out one specific fact. And so it was a lot of, it was basically every kind of way that you can learn history, some from oral history, some from research, listening to interviews. And so it was a bunch of different sources.
And when you said you started this in 2018?
2019 is when I really got started on the book.
Wow. So 4 years or 3 years, I guess, and then the year that it takes for the book to actually come out.
Yeah.
Fake year. That's wild. Was there any thing that you learned in the writing of this book that really surprised you, or that wasn't what you had thought it was going in?
So one of the things that surprised me is the idea that, first of all, there's a kind of a brick wall that you hit, and it is really shocking. When you research, you can find out that, okay, this person said this or wrote this in this newspaper on this day, this Black person. And then I would want to pull up the actual article from the newspaper, and there would always be two sentences that almost were all the same. It says, no surviving copies exist, burned by a white mob. It is shocking how many newspapers. Like, so as much as we know about Ida B. Wells, we can't read most of what she wrote because remember, the Memphis Free Speech was burned by a white mob, right? Like we would know more about, for instance, the Bleeding Kansas War, but those newspapers were burned by. It is shocking how many, not just newspapers, like on every HBCU campus, the oldest building you'll always see was like built in the early 1900s because the first structure was burned down like right after Reconstruction. The same with churches. Just so many Black historical figures were burned. Buildings were burned by a white mob. And then the other thing is kind of the opposite of that. A lot of what we thought was lost to history really wasn't lost. So when, for instance, I'm researching the history of enslaved people, like it wasn't that white people went over to Africa and just got like the first strongest people they could find. When they wanted to grow rice, they went to the specific places and cultures that had the technology and the knowledge and the horticulturists that knew how to grow rice and got those people. And then when they, like the state of Virginia, the biggest export was iron because they went to Africa to the cultures that were iron workers and got those master blacksmiths and brought them here. So like a lot of times we think like a lot of our history was lost, but a lot of our history still exists because they wrote down and told each other, hey, you could go over here and get you if you want to go right. If you want some good iron workers, man, you could go over here, right? And
Right.
not only did they tell each other right, but then that boosted their economy because they would say, they had to prove that, hey, these people you're about to buy, they come from this place that has iron workers, right?
Right.
So you don't have to take my word for it. Here's the shipping, basically what were shipping labels, right?
Right.
And so those things to prove and to boost their economy, they still exist. And a lot of our history wasn't lost. It just wasn't taught to us, but they knew, right?
Right. Ugh. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to traceythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. All right, we're back. I want to ask you about the current state of American history classes in America. I mean, you talked about how people didn't know about critical race theory when you were pitching the other book, but now we know. And there's this really fun thing that the Caucasians are doing, which is banning books that teach real life history, especially those of people from marginalized groups or any of the good stuff. So I'm wondering, what do you feel like this book has a place in these conversations? Do you feel like you could speak to sort of what's at stake right now in the ways that they're shutting down American history being told and the history of people? Like, I'm just curious what this means to you, a person who is a former teacher and a historian and a smart person who thinks a lot. Like, how are you seeing this moment?
Well, I see it as part of a continuum, right? So as soon as Black people were able to educate themselves, this process started, right? So the Daughters of the Confederacy, we talk about this in the book, they started right after the Civil War when Black people were able to educate themselves. And in the 50s and the 60s, there was the same movement. What a lot of people don't know is that let's take what we know and what we learn in schools now. Our parents didn't learn that, right? So even like including a little bit that's in the schools now, that started in the 60s and the 70s. They didn't learn anything before then. Not about slavery, not about Black people. The Ku Klux Klan were the good guys back then. Until the 50s and the 60s, right? So my mom and my uncles and aunts, they didn't learn about this stuff, which is why there were books like Before the Mayflower Hour. There were magazines like Ebony would have historical articles in them, right? Because this stuff did not exist because it was intentionally excluded. So what we're seeing now is a continuum of that effort, right? So the Moms for Liberty of today is just the old white ladies who were the daughters of the daughters of the daughters of the Confederacy, right? Or maybe the granddaughters of the daughters of Confederacy, right? It's not a new effort, and it's not really a really successful effort because they can't really stop Black people from learning things.
Right.
And so that's part of what how I feel about it. And the other thing is, I do not think that this effort would be so prominent if, like, I don't think that educators and white people care that Black people learn things or learn about history if that didn't translate into something else, right? So if you, for instance, are a 12-year-old kid in a school and you think that, well, all those Black people in that neighborhood are poor because they don't focus on education and, crime, and they're a little bit violent, like my mama says, but you learned at school about redlining. You learn about how the police were invented. You learn about all of this. You learn about how your grandparents got government handouts in the New Deal. Then you begin to not only see America in a different way, you realize, hey, if I don't like when my windows are busted out, why don't we do the same thing that they did for my grandparents, right? Why don't we improve the economy by, because it ain't really in a democracy, there is no such thing as a government, right? It's just us, right? That's our money.
Right.
It's not like the government is pulling money making money out of oxygen or rain, or it's just our money, right? And we say, we're going to do this with our money, right? So I think that is part of it. And then again, the other part of it is, and this is one of my beliefs, that they're not banning books about Black history. They're not trying to stop people from learning Black history. They're trying to stop people from learning white history. They don't want people to learn what white people did. Black people, they were cool with you teaching, like, slaves existed, but not what white people did to them. They're cool with you learning about the end of segregation, but not about your grandparents spitting on those Black kids' faces when they integrated to school, right? That's the stuff that they're trying to ban, not what we did, but what white people did.
Right. Okay, so then let me ask you this follow-up question, because it comes up in the book a little bit too when they're talking about, like, Black people getting the right to vote. And obviously there's sort of a connection about what's going on here. Is any of what we're experiencing now new? Is any of it actually new? Or is the media just, we're new people and so we're learning it all over again? Or is there something about this moment that feels particularly alarming or horrible? Or is this just all on that continuum?
So I think none of it is new. I think what is kind of new is that white people get to hear what Black people think about the stuff that's going on, right? So when you talk about the lynching movement, right? White people listen to the other white people about that, right? So they didn't hear us complaining or saying, hey, we know these accusations of rape and murder are lies, right? So they believed, because the white people own the newspapers and the telegraphs and all of that. And the same thing is true in the early 1900s. And the same thing is true even in the civil rights movement, right? They didn't, like, you could hear what Martin Luther King said in a speech, but you didn't hear what Black people were saying in barbershops and on the streets, because America was segregated. Like you didn't sit next to a Black person in school. You didn't work with a Black person. So there was really no way for white people to hear what Black people thought. And now, because they hear what Black people think, they think it is something that we have manufactured, so they deem it woke. They think that it is a new rise of anger, or they think of it as anti-white because they hear unfiltered what Black people think about this country and about this world and about what white people have done to them. And so the only new thing is that, like, I don't think there is an obstacle between Black voices and white people's ears. And that is the new thing that causes the alarm and this new regurgitated movement.
That's so well put and so smart. I feel like I have to tell you this. One of the things that your book made me feel, I personally have a hatred of the musical Hamilton. And your book made me hate Hamilton even more because I kept thinking about how much real history we could have been talking about when we were talking about fucking Alexander Hamilton and his friends instead of this fake narrative. And I know that that's not really what your job is, but I just wanted to let you know that it validated me in a lot of ways, and I now hate Hamilton even more.
Yeah,
sort of a non sequitur, but
I feel kind of the same way because I feel like they could have told the truth in Hamilton, and because if it's in a song, people are gonna like it anyway, right?
Yeah, and the thing that I really hate about the musical, not to go on a tangent, but this always comes up, but the thing that really pisses me off about Hamilton is that you've taken Black and brown Americans and descendants of people who were slaves or enslaved or whatever, and then you've put them in the position of being the heroes as the white people who are the people who are responsible for what happened to them and their families. So basically you're like, we're just going to put these white people in theatrical blackface and say now you can root. Now immigrants, we get the job done. Well, we weren't actually fucking immigrants, pal. You know what we were? We were captured from our home, okay? By you and your little friends. And it just really pisses me off.
You want to make, you want to get madder? Think about this. This is because I didn't ever thought of it that way. But the music and the art form created by Black people as a response to their oppression was
used the vehicle for the show
to use and was used to valorize the people who made them create the music
in the first place
as a response to their oppression.
And the musical's 3 hours long. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda has the audacity to say, well, we didn't have time to include slavery. What do you mean? You had 3 hours. You included every detail of the federal bank. Excuse me? What are you talking about? It's just, it makes me so mad. It is one of those things where I'm just like, there's so much you could have done. There's so and it's just frustrating. And then when I read something like what you did and I'm like, oh, wow, somebody actually did a thing that's interesting and smart about American history and didn't have to fake the funk to get there. Anyways, this is my endorsement of your book and my scathing review of Hamilton 7 years later. Wait. We got to talk about the cover and the title. Where did you come up with these things? Were you involved in the cover? How much were you involved in the cover? Were there other titles for this book? Talk about it.
So Sarah Honey Young is an artist that did the cover, and she created a whole backstory for the cover, right? So her backstory was a kid sitting in class with a book, a history book that had that cover of, if you hadn't seen it, it's the famous painting of the Declaration of Independence. And the student rips away the cover and finds the real history of Black people under the cover, right? So what we did is went back to that painting, and there exists a kind of a guide to, okay, this is this person on this painting. So there is a roadmap to everybody. And so we researched the history of those people. So when I say human smuggler, that is the actual person. That is the history of the actual person, right? So some of them were drug smugglers. Some of them were thieves. That's how they built their fortunes, and that's how they became what we call founding fathers. So we researched, like every little bit was researched, and it means something, even the cover.
I love it. And what about the title?
Black AF History. So I actually trademarked Black AF years ago. So I am a lot of people don't know, I am a poet also. And when I would travel doing poetry years ago, of course, there's no money or acclaim or fame in poetry. So you got to figure out a way to make money. And I would sell shirts that said Black AF. And so I trademarked it. And of course, when I decided to write the history book, it seemed like a perfect name for me.
Yeah. Is there anything that's not in this book that you wish could be or was?
Oh yeah, there's a lot that I wish. The story of Moses Dixon and the National Slave Revolt. I wish I could have gone into that more. There are. Well, I think I went pretty deep into the Gullah culture. There are a bunch of I could have overdosed you guys on just slave revolts if I wanted to.
Right.
Just there are so many small detailed stories. You could do a story on just the music, and you could do one on just HBCUs and the development, just on sports. So there's so many things that I wish I could have included in the book. There was a whole chapter that we decided not to include on the history of and the complex stories of mixed race in America. And
my people.
From the Hemmings to, there's George Washington has descendants, and the Madisons, right? And so there was a whole chapter on just Black towns and how these towns came to be. The other Wall Streets was another, the other Black Wall Streets, like the Black Wall Street that we hear about in Tulsa was like one of the lesser known Black Wall Streets.
Wow.
Like at the time, if you would have said Black Wall Street, they would have probably assumed you were talking about Durham, North Carolina, a section they call Hayti, or Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia. So there's a bunch of stuff that I wish I could have included.
Wow. Okay, I want to talk quickly about your process. How do you write? Where are you? Are you listening to music or no? Are there snacks and beverages? How often? All that kind of stuff.
So when I was writing this book, I did this crazy thing that I'm still trying to get out of called biphasic sleep. So apparently there's this theory that for most of the history of mankind, we slept in 2 cycles. We would go to sleep when the sun was down, wake up in the middle of the night, what they call the witching hour, and that's when we would make kids. That's when we would read the Bible. That's when we would take care of the animals because the animals were asleep. We would milk the cows and stuff like that, and then go to sleep and wake up again when the sun went up. Well, I did that, and it actually works. You sleep.
Wow.
I'd go to sleep about 8 or 9 o'clock, wake up about midnight to 3 or 4 and write, and then sleep from about 4 till about 7 or 8 and get up, and you'd be actually refreshed. And now I can't get out of that sleep habit. But that's when I would write during the day because I got a regular job at the Griot, and then write the book at night. So that was part of my process. There were no snacks. I can't really, so I'm very severely ADHD, so I can't have any
no
sounds
distractions
or anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So
got it.
So that's how I worked.
So now that you're still in that cycle, what are you doing with those hours in the middle of the night?
Well, I still have it's almost like a weekly version of Hamilton I'm doing on a podcast called Drapetomaniacs. So we take Pharrell, the producer, and I take a different Black story every week that's really people don't know about, or an aspect of a person that people don't know about, and do a episode that uses music and sound and celebrity voices to narrate this story. So I'm writing that in the middle of the night. I'm working on the next book. There's always something to write. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm trying to watch TV, catch up on everything. So that's what I'm doing.
Do you find it easy to wake up at that time? And because when I wake up in the middle of the night, I want to go back to sleep immediately. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm wide awake. And then I'll start reading a book and I'll be asleep in 10 minutes. So is it easy for you to wake up in the middle of the night, or was that a struggle to get into that process?
Well, I think so. It's just crazy that I get more sleep now. So I was always a night person. So I would stay up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But of course, you got to go to work the next day. So you have to wake up and you get less sleep. But when you break it up into 2 different cycles, you're more likely to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep than I was if I would stay up to 2 or 3 in the morning, just because I'm a night person anyway. So I'm used to doing stuff at night.
Got it. I'm the opposite. I need my sleep. Sometimes I go to bed when you go to bed and don't wake up in the middle of the night. I wake up in the morning. Like I'm like a heavy need for sleep person. So you're like a real life influencer. Not like I sell, gummy vitamins, but like a person who really influences the culture and shapes the way people think about things, especially like via Twitter. I feel like so many people know you from that, and you're on television, as I mentioned before. You write for the Griot, and you're just like a person who's influential in the thinking of America, specifically, I think, for a lot of Black Americans. Do you ever feel pressure or stress around that?
No, not really, because well, it's two things, right? I don't feel a lot of pressure or stress because I often turn down stuff that I don't know about. Like, I don't want to go on and say crazy stuff. Like, I'm not going to be on the TV talking about relationships or, right? Like, so I don't feel the pressure to talk about stuff that I don't know about. And I don't feel the need to talk about areas that someone else already covered, right? So, and then I kind of don't want to influence necessarily what people think, but to say, hey, have you ever thought about it like this, though? Right? Mm-hmm. And not saying I'm right and you're wrong, but hey, you never considered this, right? And here's a fact that is based. I'm not saying that like government handouts are bad or good. All I'm saying is that when we need to rebuild that economy, we created the largest government program in the history of the world, and it kind of worked, right? That's why we have a middle class. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I got history on my side. You ever thought about that? Right? So yeah, so I don't feel the need to comment on stuff that I don't know about, or that like my voice isn't needed in that conversation.
Yeah. Okay, what about a word that you can never spell correctly on the first try?
Oh gosh, there's so okay. The biggest word I always like have to look up. I get Wednesday mixed up a lot, and this is the number one on the list. Sergeant.
Oh, I don't think I know how to spell it. I'm a terrible speller, but I don't think I've ever had to spell that. Sargent. Is that wrong?
I don't know. I don't think that's right though.
I gotta Google it now. I don't think that seemed too easy. Sergeant. I'm Googling. No, there's an A. Sergeant. Oh, no. Well, okay. I can't spell it either. Apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, Sergeant. I get a bunch of those at Caribbean, especially double letters. Yeah. Like
double letters.
Caribbean sheriff.
I can't. One that I realized I can't do recently is separate or separately. Can't do that because I've been writing a lot about separate, and I can't do it. I have no clue. Every time I get the red line, and I'm just like, I'm done. I've given up on this word. Just tattoo it on my hand or something. I don't know. So for people who love Black AF history, what are some other books that you might recommend to them that are in conversation with your work?
I think The Souls of Black Folk, Before the Mayflower. And there are some other books that aren't necessarily about history books. A Black Man's Guide to the Constitution by Elie Mystal.
So good.
Right. Blair Kelly's book called Black Folk is really good. So yeah, those are some books that I think that people kind of that kind of have the voice and the perspective, while they might not necessarily be about the same subjects.
Yeah, the Elie Mystal is such a good book to be in conversation with because they are similar in tone. There's that similar sense of humor, and also like this is a Black person telling you about this stuff. Like this is our perspective. I love that. Love that. What do you hope people will keep in mind as they read your book?
I think one of the things that I think that they will realize and recognize is that again, back to what I was saying earlier, right? This is not saying like the stuff that you learned was wrong, because most of the book is not saying it didn't happen the way you learned it. It happened this way. What I'm saying is this is a different perspective, right? So that stuff about Lexington and Concord and the American Revolution did happen, but like black people just saw two different kinds of white people fighting about something that didn't affect them, right? So none of that mattered to us, right? And so I think the perspective is what I hope people realize. Like, it's not a new history. It is a different perspective on history that already exists.
I love it. Okay, here's my last question for you. If you could have one person, dead or alive, read this book, who would you want it to be? Dead
or alive? I think I'd have to go with just to see what W.E.B. Du Bois thinks of it. I think he's I really think he's the smartest person American person in American history. And so I would just like to see what he thought about it.
I love that. Such a good answer. Well, everybody, you can get Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America by Michael Harriot, wherever you get your books. It is out now. Michael, do you do the audiobook narration?
Yep, I do the audiobook narration.
Okay, so get the audiobook. I'm sure it's fantastic. I haven't listened to it yet, but the book is great. It's out now. Get it wherever you get your books. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and telling us what to read.
Yeah. And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you to our guest, Michael Harriot, for joining the show. I'd also like to thank Heidi Richter for helping to make this conversation possible. Remember, our October book club pick is Tar Baby by Toni Morrison, which we will be discussing on October 25th with Linda Honey. If you love the show and want inside access to it, head over to patreon.com/The Stacks and join the Stacks Pack. Make sure you're subscribed to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and TikTok and Threads, and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And you can always check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Lauren Tyree. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagira Gis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.